Dirtjar, the watcher Elena, stood before the police station entrance, her clothes torn and damp from the rain, holding a small camera device in one palm and a voice recorder in the other. Inside the dead device was Mark's confession. Clear, violent, unmistakable. She had been inside the prison of her own home for 72 hours. She had discovered the cameras. She had poisoned the servers. She had broken his knee. Now she was going to burn everything down. 14 hours earlier, the morning had begun like any other. Her hand, nails painted pale pink, reached for the black iPhone 14 on the marble kitchen island. She tapped the screen. It stayed black. She pressed the side button repeatedly, watching the reflections of gray clouds move across the dark glass like ghosts. Outside, the sky was heavy with the weight of an overcast morning, everything subdued and waiting. Mark entered from the hallway, his white dress shirt already ironed, navy slacks pressed with military precision. He carried a silver travel mug. His eyes didn't meet Elena's face. They fixed instead on her hands, on the phone, on the way her fingers moved across its surface. His shadow lengthened across the marble as he approached. "The battery probably died because of that podcast you were listening to at 2 a.m., he said, his voice flat and casual, the way someone might comment on the weather. Elena froze. Her hand hovered above the phone as if the device had burned her. She looked up at Mark, her eyes widening, pupils dilating. In the dark screen of the dead phone, she could see his reflection, distorted and strange. The refrigerator hummed behind them, filling the silence. "I was wearing headphones, Mark," she whispered, her voice trembling. "How did you know I was listening to a podcast?" Mark took a slow sip from his mug. He leaned forward, placing his free hand on the counter, his fingers inches from hers. The gold wedding band caught the light, gleaming like a small accusation. "I just know you, Al," he said, his voice darkly playful, the kind of tone that made her stomach tighten. "I know everything about your little habits." Elena pulled her hand back, as if the counter had turned to fire. She grabbed the phone and walked quickly toward the hallway, her steps uneven and rushed. Behind her, she heard Mark's soft laugh, the kind that followed her like a shadow into every room of the house. The walk-in closet became her refuge. She dropped to her knees, moving shoeboxes with desperate hands, reaching under the bottom shelf of the mahogany organizer. Dust motes danced in the thin shaft of closet light. Her fingers touched something small, hard, and metallic, taped to the underside of the wood. She peeled it back, her breath coming faster. It was a black cylinder no larger than a button, with a tiny lens and a green flickering LED that blinked at her like a malicious eye. "Oh, God," she breathed. She looked up at the smoke detector in the center of the closet ceiling. A second green light blinked through its plastic grate. Then another caught her eye, a small lens embedded in the frame of a mirror. Another in the corner where the walls met. The closet suddenly felt smaller, the walls pressing in from all sides. Her breathing became shallow, rapid. She dropped the device into her coat pocket just as she heard the heavy thud of the front door closing. Mark was leaving. She ran to the window. His car was already backing out of the driveway. The silver SUV sat locked in the driveway like a trap. Elena pulled the handle, but nothing happened. Her keys were in the kitchen. She needed to think. The car needed to be open. She needed to be gone. A shadow moved across the concrete. Victor emerged from the garage, massive in his gray tracksuit, his movements deliberate and controlled. "Mark said the car needs a diagnostic," he said, his voice monotone and threatening. "You should go back inside." Elena tried to dart past him. She almost made it. His hand came up and closed around her upper arm, and suddenly she was moving backward, the world tilting as he spun her toward the house. His fingers sank into the fabric of her coat. "Let go of me," she screamed. "Get your hands off me." Her purse was heavy. She swung it, and the brass buckle connected with his cheek. He grunted and released her for just a moment, just enough. But Victor recovered in an instant. His hands found her shoulders and shoved her hard toward the front porch. Her knees hit the stone steps. Pain shot through her legs, her palms scraping raw against the cold stone. Blood bloomed in thin lines across her skin. "Go back inside. Now," Victor growled, standing over her. Elena looked back at the front door. It was opening by itself, the smart lock system responding to something only Mark could control. It was like watching a mouth open, waiting to swallow her. She pulled herself up and went back inside. By 11 o'clock, Elena was sitting at Mark's mahogany desk, her hands still shaking. The laptop opened easily. She knew the password, had watched him enter it 100 times. The wallpaper was a photo of her sleeping, her face peaceful and unaware. She clicked the browser and typed facebook.com, her fingers moving mechanically. A window popped up instantly. "Access denied. Redirecting." The screen flicked, and a new window opened. A chat box with Mark's name at the top. The notification appeared in real time. "Mark is typing. Elena, I told you the internet is down for maintenance. Why are you trying to circumvent the firewall?" She typed frantically, her fingers striking the keys with violent force. "Mark, where are you? Let me out." The laptop camera light turned on, a bright blue LED that made her suck in her breath. A video feed appeared in the corner of the screen, a bird's-eye view of herself sitting at the desk, her posture hunched and desperate. The camera was in the ceiling fan. She was being watched from above. "Sit up straight, Elle. You look so tired." Mark's voice came through the speakers. Elena slammed the laptop shut so hard the screen cracked. Her office chair shot backward and crashed into the bookshelf. A book fell, its spine broken. The architecture of control. She pushed it away with her foot and stood, her entire body shaking. At 1 o'clock, the living room window became a portal. Through it, Elena could see Mrs. Gable walking her poodle, the woman's bright yellow sweater visible even in the gray afternoon light. The poodle barked at something unseen. Mrs. Gable was only 50 feet away. Elena picked up a heavy glass vase, gripping its narrow neck. She wound up. She could throw it. She could break the glass. She could scream. The front door burst open before she could move. Victor didn't go for her immediately. He went for the window. He tackled Elena to the side, and the vase slipped from her grip, hitting the hardwood floor with a shattering crash. Glass exploded across the dark wood in 1,000 glittering fragments. Victor's hand closed around her hair. He dragged her away from the window, and she clawed at his arms, drawing blood. His skin tore beneath her nails, but instead of releasing her, he swung his other hand across her face. The open palm strike was brutal and precise. Her head snapped back from the force of it. "Mark doesn't want you making scenes, Elena," he said. She kicked at his shin. He grunted and threw her onto the sofa, pulling a plastic zip tie from his pocket as he stood over her, breathing hard. She watched the shadows on his face, the set of his jaw. And she knew that fighting any more would only make things worse. She lay still. By 3 o'clock, the zip ties had been removed. They left red marks around her wrists like a second bracelet. But Elena was still on the sofa when the 75-inch television screen flickered to life. She hadn't touched the remote. The screen glowed in the darkening room. A man in a suit appeared, professional and calm. His backdrop a bookshelf filled with identical white binders. The chyron at the bottom read, Dr. Aries, the benefits of constant spousal monitoring. Total transparency creates total safety, the man said, his voice smooth and rhythmic. If she has nothing to hide, she has nothing to fear. Elena stared at the screen. Something in her mind clicked. She knew this man. He had been at her wedding. He hadn't been a doctor then. He had been Mark's commanding officer from the private security firm, the Colonel. But now he was something different. A consultant, a validator, a priest in the church of surveillance. The video changed. A new image filled the screen. It was footage from earlier today, from inside the closet. She could see herself on her knees, her hand reaching for the camera. A red circle appeared around her fingers, tracking the movement like a hunter's sight. Mark's voice came through the speakers, his tone disappointed and clinical. You shouldn't have done that, Elle. Now we have to start part 3. The screen went black. The basement door opened at 6 o'clock. Victor stood at the top of the stairs, his expression blank. He didn't say anything. He just gestured downward. Elena walked to the edge and descended into darkness. The wooden stairs creaked beneath her feet. At the bottom, her shoulder struck a concrete pillar as she stumbled, pain flowering across her joint. The door at the top clicked shut, the lock engaging with a mechanical finality. A single bare bulb illuminated as her eyes adjusted. In the dusty light, Elena could see a corkboard on the far wall. It was covered in blueprints of the house. Each room was marked with red dots for cameras and blue dots for microphones. The dots were everywhere. Kitchen, 7 cameras, 5 microphones. Master bedroom, 9 cameras, 8 microphones. She stepped closer, her eyes tracking across the pages. The pattern was obsessive and complete. She noticed a cluster of dots labeled subterranean feed underneath the garage. The monitoring wasn't just the house. It was the perimeter. It was everything. Water dripped from a pipe somewhere in the darkness. The electrical hum of a server rack sounded from the far corner. She walked toward it, toward the sound of machines that were watching her, recording her, analyzing her movements and her breaths and her failures. At 7 o'clock, the basement doors opened again. Mark walked down slowly, one step at a time. He was holding a tray with a glass of water and a white pill. He placed the tray on a workbench near Elena, his movements deliberate and paternalistic. She clawed at his arm, her nails digging into his flesh. But he didn't budge. The world began to darken around the edges. He let go. She slumped against the wall, gasping. Mark reached into his pocket and pulled out a tablet. He showed it to her. On the screen was a live video feed of a bedroom. Elena recognized the floral pattern of the comforter. It was her sister Sarah's bedroom. Sarah was lying in bed, reading a book, completely unaware that she was being watched. Sarah is so careless, Mark said, his voice monotonous and deadly. She let the technician in yesterday. If you leave, I have no reason to protect her privacy anymore, or her safety. Elena sank to the floor. Her back slid down the concrete wall. She covered her face with her hands and began to sob, her shoulders shaking with the weight of a trap that had no exit. She was at the bottom. There was nowhere left to go. Mark stood over her, looking down with a satisfied smile. He left the pill and the glass on the floor next to her. Then he turned and walked up the stairs, his footsteps slow and measured. The door locked behind him with a click. Elena didn't sleep. She lay on the cold concrete floor until midnight, and then she got up. She walked to the server rack, her eyes tracing the maze of black and blue Ethernet cables. She remembered Mark complaining once about how the basement humidity affected the unshielded connections. He had mentioned it during dinner, a casual detail offered while he was scrolling through something on his phone, not paying attention to her. But she had been paying attention. She had been paying attention to everything he said, looking for the cracks in his architecture of control. She picked up the glass of water Mark had left on the floor. The water was still sitting there, untouched, waiting. She held it over the top ventilation grating of the main server unit and tilted the glass. Water splashed onto the metal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a loud crackle pop burst from the machine. Blue sparks shot up like fireworks, and white smoke poured from the vents. The basement went pitch black. The bare bulb died. Every light in the surveillance network blinked out. Upstairs, an alarm started wailing, a high-pitched electronic scream that cut through the darkness. The sound was beautiful. The sound was freedom. Elena moved by feel, climbing the stairs in the absolute darkness. The basement door opened. The smart lock had defaulted to open due to the power surge. She burst into the living room. The alarm was still screaming. Rain was falling somewhere outside, a steady percussion against the windows. Victor was there, holding a flashlight. He had been ready, waiting for some kind of emergency. But not this one. Not the one where Elena had taken control. His flashlight beam swung toward her. He lunged. Elena was ready. She still had the wrench. She had held it, carried it with her from the basement, waiting for the moment when she would need it. She swung low, using the weight of it, and hit Victor in the kneecap with all the force she could generate. His leg buckled at an angle it wasn't supposed to bend. The sound was a sickening crunch, bone giving way. He collapsed on the rug, his screams echoing through the dead house. Mark appeared at the top of the stairs, still in his pajamas. He was holding the tablet, but it was dead. The network was destroyed. His control was gone. For the first time, he looked confused, uncertain, human. Elena reached the front door. The latch opened. Outside, the street lights were visible through the opening, throwing blue and amber light onto the wet pavement. "Elena, wait, you don't know what you're doing." Mark's voice came from behind her, but it was weak, desperate. She didn't look back. She stepped through the door and into the rain. The police station entrance appeared through the wet night. A blue sign glowed with its message, "Police." Elena stood in front of it, damp and torn, her clothes hanging in tatters. Her posture was straight. Her breathing was steady. The rain fell on her hair and face, and she didn't wipe it away. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small digital voice recorder. Not one of Mark's devices. One of hers. She had bought it 3 days ago, hidden it in a ventilation duct, and waited. She had recorded everything from that moment forward. Every threat, every confession, every admission of what he had done. She pressed play. "I'll kill your sister if you try to leave again, Elena." Mark's voice came through the speaker, violent and clear. "I have the cameras everywhere. I own you." The recording ended. Elena reached into her other pocket and withdrew the tiny camera, the one she had found in the closet, the first piece of evidence that had started everything. She held it in her palm, showing it to the darkness. The device was inert now, its LED dark. Its recording stopped. But it had served its purpose. It had showed her the truth. "He thought he was the only one watching," she said to the empty street. "He forgot I was watching him too." The heavy glass doors of the station were in front of her. She pushed them open. Warm light spilled out onto the wet pavement. Inside, she could see the glow of desk lamps, the movement of officers moving through their routines, the ordinary machinery of law and order. A no-entry sign on the door reflected her face as she passed through it. She walked into the light and didn't look back at the rain or the darkness or the house that had tried to swallow her. The doors closed behind her with a soft hiss. Outside, the alarm in the house stopped wailing. The city continued on, indifferent to the small story of a woman who had walked into a police station at 1 in the morning, carrying a camera and a recording and the broken pieces of her own survival. The rain kept falling. The night kept turning. The machines in the basement grew cold,